All right, folks, can you hear me? Good. So I hope you all got your snacks. There are no juice boxes out there, but that's a shame. Anyway, if you can hear me in the snack room, please come on by. We're going to get started here in just a minute with none other than Dr. John Vervaeke. I'm sure everybody knows Dr. Vervaeke's work by now. Such a deepening, necessary part of this ongoing shared fractal conversation. So I'm really excited to have him up here. And I wanted to do the no, 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 no thing, but I couldn't make a joke with that. So I guess I just did. Right, yeah. Oh, yeah, you know what I'm doing. See what I'm doing. These Zoomers, I tell you, God bless them. Can I get a high sign from Sam? Are we ready to go? Oh, all right. So without further ado, please welcome to the stage none other than Dr. John Vervaeke.
Kind of feels like home. I've been sort of being cast in the role of speaking on behalf of science, and and I'm happy to do that. Who and what I am is undergoing something of a change right now because of the philosophical Silk Road pilgrimage. So I'm kind of a scientist on a pilgrimage. But I am going to try and do something quite ambitious, and maybe it'll be what Paul warned us against, an overreach. But a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what is a heaven for? So I'm going to try my best. I'm going to, instead of trying to go into deep, complex arguments, I'm going to try and gather a lot of stuff together. So I'm going to say something. Each point I make, I have an actual argument and publication pretty much for, and I can't do that. So I'm going to rely on, I'm just going to give you a gist, and then another gist, and then another gist, and another gist, and that's how it's going to go. Okay, so I'm going to be making use of what's called scientific idealization. Catherine Elgin, in her wonderful book, Good Enough, points out that idealization is crucial to science. We do lines of best fit, and we do frictionless surface and inertial motion and all this stuff, and you have to do that. And I'm going to be engaging in an idealization, and I hope you don't take me to be conveying, because I'm not, that everything I'm going to be talking about can go wrong. Okay? It can go wrong, like really wrong, and hurt people in a deep and profound ways. And, you know, we've bumped up against that. I'm not denying any of that. But I'm going to talk about the idealization, the ideal case, because I'm trying to do something, well, scientific here, because often the ideal case is helpful for getting clarity about the structural, functional organization, about what you're talking, about what the topic you're addressing. So that's what's going on. I'm not denying. So if you want to criticize me later, I'll talk to you about it, but that's not what I'm going to be doing here. Okay? All right, so I don't know what to presuppose or not. I'm going to go do a quick overview of the core that I'm always working from. Some of you, this will be some updates, because it's changed from Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. And so I want to talk about predictive processing, this other thing you might have heard of, relevance realization, and 4E cognitive science. Okay? And I want to lay that out, because part of my argument is going to be that there is a paradigm shift going on in cognitive science and in biology, and that paradigm shift is much more culturally important than hoping that the paradigm shift is going to come from physics. And I think that paradigm shift is actually giving us deep ways to talk about spirit and fellowship. So I want to start with predictive processing. What is it? It's one of the big frameworks, and it is an attempt to address one of the meta problems. I'm going to use meta a lot. Live with it. Okay. Okay. So you're generally intelligent. Unlike the so-called AGI that people are claiming we might have, and there's lots of, and I can talk about that later, right? You are, intelligent in multiple domains, in multiple ways, for multiple reasons, in ways that are highly mutually predictive of each other. There's some general factor there. And the work I do, we argue that that general factor is because you you have an ability to solve two meta problems. Meta problems are problems you have to solve whenever you're trying to solve a specific problem. So no matter what problem you're trying to solve these two meta problems. The first one is anticipate the world. Anticipate the world. Everything else being equal, if you can anticipate the world better than I am, you'll solve all of your problems better than I do. Because you'll anticipate the tiger, and I will meet the tiger. And I'm dead. And you're laughing. Right? That's why you judge things that can anticipate with what Michael Levin calls a cognitive light cone. You judge them more intelligent. That's why you think a dog is more intelligent than a frog. Okay? So how do you anticipate? Because you're doing it right now. What's the next word? There you go. And that's what the machines try to emulate, by the way, the predictive processing and the large language models. Okay? So what's going on here? Now, what Carl Friston came up with, and other people like Andy Clark, my former student and colleague Mark Miller, is the idea the brain doesn't actually try to predict the world. And this is the first doorway to spirit. What? Hang with me. The brain doesn't try to predict the world. That's too complex for any machine. The brain tries to predict your body interacting with the world. So let me give you an example. I don't have to go to retina school. I don't have to do anything to learn to use my retina. All I have to do is open my eyes, light hits my retina, and there's patterns of nerve firing. Yeah? And do you get that those patterns change as I move around? That's a sensory motor pattern. There's patterns happening on the retina. So there's this level right here. I suppose I should do this. Okay, this part directly interacting with the world. No learning required there. And patterns are happening here. Now, what you have is you have a brain level just above that. And what it's trying to do is it's trying to detect patterns in here and complete them ahead of time. It's just trying to figure out this is what the pattern's going to be. Now, because this isn't the world, because the world isn't trying to help you. That's why trying to predict the world is really hard. But this part of the brain and this part of the brain, they belong together. And so this part can try and say, I think you're going to do that pattern, and this part can give it feedback and say, yeah, you got it right, or no, you got it wrong. Pretty easy. Now, if I try to walk a little bit faster than that across the stage, the sensory motor loop is too slow for me to do it. I can't do it. If I were to rely on the information to go down and come out, it's too fast. I bet you've all run faster than that, yeah? What happens is the cerebellum tries to pick up on patterns in the sensory motor patterns in my eyes, my legs, tries to detect patterns and complete them ahead of time. And that's how I can do that. Do you understand? Does that make sense? It's detecting and completing patterns. Here's another one. This one will get creepier. So look at this. Look at this. You see that color? Yeah? How many of you can see the color? How many of you can see the whole color of the whole wall? Okay, your eye can't do that. Your eye can't subtend all of that. What happens is your eye is picking up on little patches, and then a higher level in the brain is trying to detect and complete a pattern. So now I'm going to say something that I hope lands for you. You're mostly imagining that wall. You're mostly imagining the floor. Now, as soon as I say that, it sounds like, and some people I hate this, it's a controlled hallucination. You know the defining feature of hallucinations? They're false. This isn't false. You know what an important property of predictions are? They can be true. True prediction. Okay? So we need, and so Henri Corbin came up with a really powerful distinction between the imaginary. So imagine a sailboat in your mind. Can you do it? Picture in your head. Are the sails up or down? Put your hands up if they were up or down. There you go. Okay. You form a little picture and la, 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 la. Turns out that's not very important, even though that's what we think imagination is about. How do we know it's not important? There's at least 5 to 10% of the population cannot do that, and they don't suffer at all. Now, that's imaginary. I want you to compare to a kid who's putting out their arms, ties a little blanket around them and goes, "Shh, I'm Superman." They're not forming a picture of Superman. They're trying to see and be in the world the way Superman is. Do you see the difference? Everybody does that, because that's very important. That's indispensable to cognition. And I'm going to show you that. And what I'm trying to show you is your experience is already deeply imaginal. So what the European Enlightenment gave us this idea that there's reality. You got to hit surfaces very hard when you do that. And then there's the imagination. And here's the scientist. And here's the romantic poet. And that's pretty much all bullshit. Okay? These dichotomies, if I can do one thing here, I want to smash the dichotomies. Okay, so right from the beginning, notice it's imaginal, and notice two things. The brain is modeling itself to model the world, and whenever it's modeling the world, it's modeling itself. I'll do that again. When the brain is trying to model the world, it's modeling itself. Your modeling of yourself and your modeling of the world bleed into each other. Your detection of the world and your anticipation of the world bleed into each other. You are porous. All right. Now the other part, and they're interlocking. The more I anticipate the world, the more the problem I face, the more information I have to process. And how many of you have not heard me talk about relevance realization? Okay. The amount of information I can pay attention in this room, all the ways I could direct my attention, all the possible combinations is greater than the number of atomic particles in the universe. All the possible ways I could connect the information in my long-term memory, like I could think about aardvarks, and then I could think about Archduke Ferdinand in World War I, and perhaps that'll lead me to think about bauxite mining in Australia. All combinatorially explosive. All the possibilities I can consider, right? All the possible inferences of everything I pay attention to. All of this is combinatorially explosive, and what you do is you ignore most of that information, you're oblivious to it, and you find obvious what you should be thinking about, what you should be remembering, what you should be inferring. Do you do it perfectly? No, because you can't. Because here's what you don't do. You don't check all the information to see if it's relevant or not. You somehow zero in on the relevant information. And you do it reliably. And the LLMs don't give us any, two more times, any explanation of how you do it, because they're completely dependent on us. We generate the relevance relationships between tokens, we generate the relevance relationships in the data sets, we generate the relevance relationships on the internet, and we generate the relevance realization in the appropriateness judgments when we're training them. They explain it one iota. Okay? Doesn't mean they're not dangerous. Okay, so we are constantly doing that. What's the basic idea? Predictive processing is trying to anticipate the world, and it hits a dilemma because it hits trade-offs. Trade-offs is, as you try and go one way, you lose on the other. So should I stay here and try and survive? It's familiar. That's got an advantage to it. But there's also diminishing returns. Should I go and explore? Well, that's dangerous and precarious, but there might be huge benefit. So what should you do? Explore or exploit? Yeah, right. They're trade-off relationships because you should do both, but each comes at the expense of the other. So what happens is predictive processing is trying to reduce you being surprised by the world. It hits these trade-offs, and it evolves opponent processing. This is at the heart of relevance realization. You have your attention is doing it right now. Part of your attention is trying to focus on me. It's called the task focus network. And another part is mind wandering. You're going off and thinking about other things. And what happens is most of those are useless. You kill most of them off, but you keep a few and you come back and you change how you're paying attention. Then you wander off, then you come back, and you're doing this opponent processing. Okay. Left and right hemisphere. Left, familiar problems, well-defined. Right hemisphere, ill-defined problems with novelty. Back, should you just do one or the other? No. So you have two hemispheres and they do opponent processing. This is all through your biology. Opponent processing. What you get out of opponent processing is you get what Merleau-Ponty calls an optimal grip. So, how should I look at something? There's trade-off relationships. Should I look at it like this? But when I look at it like this, I can't be looking at it like this. But when I'm looking at it like this, I can't be looking at it like this. How should I look at it? You do opponent processing until you get the best grip on the situation that is relevant to the task at hand. And I want you to notice something else, how that's imaginal. Do you actually ever see the bottle? Are you sure? Do you ever see the bottle? Do you ever see the bottle? You're actually doing this ongoing through line through all of these different ways, we call them aspects, that it could be relevant to you. That's imaginal, but it doesn't mean it's false. So you're forming this optimal grip, connectedness. And then what you're doing is you're often standing back and you're considering potential optimal grips, and you're trying to take the best stance that will give you the best availability to all the optimal grips. That's like in fighting, like Jeet Kune Do. I don't fight with this. This is because this is good for jab or hook or back fist, however I need it. The stance is like, another one, it's a meta-optimal grip. That's your orientation. You are orienting right now. And Kant discovered a long time ago that before I can do any argument, any reason, any categorization, anything, I have to be properly oriented. He got really perplexed. I bet you didn't know this about Kant. He got really perplexed between my propositional description of my left hand and right hand are identical. And he realized, but they're different. And I need something other than the propositions to distinguish my right hand from my left hand. And he didn't have such a thing, so he said it was feeling. And then he put it aside. Okay, so you're orienting, you're optimal gripping, and all of this is way before you do any categorizing, any reasoning. Okay? That's relevance realization. And I use a term for that, orienting, optimal gripping, connectedness, religio. Because that's what it means. It means connectedness. So you've got this connectedness and relevance realization. So you've got anticipation, relevance realization, connectedness. It's inherently imaginal in nature. It's constantly evolving. Now let's pay attention to the fact that this imaginal is actually indispensable to you being rational. before you can reason, you have to be able to be aware of your own cognition. It's called metacognition. So I can ask you, what are you thinking about right now? Presumably you can answer me, yes? If you ask a 3-year-old, 3.5-year-old, what's in your head right now, they'll tell you blood. Like, you have to develop that skill. It takes time. Okay, now here's the thing I want you to think about. That space you go into to look at your own thoughts, is that a physical space? No. Is it just fictional? Unreal? No, because you actually get real knowledge that you absolutely have to have in order to become reasonable. That space inside your head is imaginal. It's imaginal. And it helps you get an optimal grip on your own cognition. What about your relationship to your future self? If you're going to be rational, you have to do things now for the sake of your future self. Is that future self, is it physically real? Well, no. Is it merely fictional? No, because that's not right either, because if you don't pay attention to it, you're dead. So what is it? Oh, it's imaginal. Sometimes I have to think really concretely, and sometimes I have to think very abstractly. Notice what my hands are doing. I'm doing this. Is that physical? Is that abstract, like literally above us? No. Is that just fiction? No, because try and think of it without doing that. The imaginal is essential to being reasonable. But the imaginal is depending on your capacities for anticipation and relevance realization. The imaginal, which is so central to you being reasonable, depends on the fact that you are in this porous relationship with reality. You bleed into the world and the world bleeds into you. And that's not the model of reasonable rationality we were given by the Enlightenment. The model we were given is, and I'll come back to this, is the model of disengagement. This is Charles Taylor's work. To be rational is to disengage and try and look at things objectively. Let's go back to this relevance realization. Where's relevance? Is it in me? Is it a subjective value that I have? No, because I can get it wrong, and if I get it wrong, I die. Oh, so it's an objective property of things. So notice this. It's now relevant to you, and now you're doomed, because if it's objective, it's going to be relevant to you for the rest of your life. So it's neither objective nor subjective. Where is it? Where is it? And notice what we're trying to do here. We're trying to, these are the dichotomies. See, the disengagement of modernity is built on dichotomies. It's built on cutting things off from each other. In here is myself, and that's voluntary, and that's where my values come from. Out there is objectivity, and that's where the facts come from. And you can't get from values to facts, and you can't get from facts to values, and Sam Harris and all those people argue, blah, 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 blah. Now, does that actually make any ultimate sense? Because is relevance a fact or a value? Ah, right. All these dichotomies are like the grid work by which we are supposed to see and understand the world. But our relationship to the world isn't a dichotomous disengagement, it's a porous participation. It's porous participation. Why does that matter? Well, let's keep doing this. And I'm going to keep circling through the imaginal and the rational and showing you its porous participation again and again and again and again and again and again. See, that domain of transjectivity, of the porous participation that is deeper, more real than the subjective-objective dichotomy, which is not universal across cultures or history, by the way, even though we think it's natural. That religio domain, that's where voluntary necessity is. What's that? Well, this is a notion by Harry Frankfurt. And it's convergent with work by John Searle and a whole bunch of other people. So you're reading a compelling argument. It's persuasive, yes? And you come to the conclusion, you go, hey, I think that's true. So it's compelling. Was it compulsive? Did you lose your agency? Oh, I'm just addicted to the conclusion. No, that's actually the hallmark of somebody who's irrational. They'll go to the conclusion regardless of the argument, yeah? So notice this distinction. I'm going to play with these words. It's compelling, but it's not compulsive. All right? And notice how it doesn't land. It doesn't land cleanly in voluntary or necessary. So that's why he calls it voluntary necessity, just to be provocative. You're in love with somebody. It's compelling. But do you feel that you're losing your agency by loving them? No. It feels like I am utterly convinced that I've made a lifetime commitment to Sarah, that I love this woman profoundly. And I don't feel like a drug addict. I feel like I am totally free in the fact that I can do no other than love her the way I do. And I hope that lands for you. There's the beautiful sunset. It's compelling. Is it compulsive? No. You don't feel like you're losing your agency. You feel like it's coming into fruition. Voluntary necessity. Look, it's at the heart of reason. It's at the heart of love. It's at the heart of beauty. It's at the heart of relevance. Things are relevant to you. They're compelling, but they're not compulsive because they can be relevant 1 minute, salient 1 minute. Your left big toe, it's salient to you now. Hopefully it doesn't remain that way for much longer. Voluntary necessity, voluntary necessity, voluntary necessity. Do you see? Religio is the domain of voluntary necessity. I am talking about spirit, although you haven't heard me use the word yet. I am talking about spirit. I'm trying to give us a new way of talking about spirit. I was talking to Bishop Maximus on the Philosophical Silk Road, and he was giving me an argument. Some of you might have seen the video. And he was giving an argument for Clement of Alexandria, and he had what's called a presuppositional view of faith. And when it was done, I said to him, something just clicked for me. This Philosophical Silk Road has just unleashed a tsunami of synchronicities for me that I don't know how to explain, and I'm just sort of riding the wave. And I said, I've been trying to understand this voluntary necessity, but what I think is going on is the sensed presence of that voluntary necessity, that's the common heart sense of reason, beauty, love, flow, relevance, that common heart sense, that sensed presence of that, that's what you mean by faith. And he said, John, I think that's a perfect argument. Now, when a bishop tells you that, you pay attention to it, right? And so, good. I was kind of like, wow. You see, that's what I have with Sarah. I'm faithful to her. It doesn't mean that I get up, what things do I believe about Sarah without good evidence? That's not what that means. It means I have a sensed presence of a calling to her of voluntary necessity. And that voluntary necessity isn't something aberrant to my cognitive agents. It's at the heart of reason, love, beauty, flow, relevance realization, predictive processing, etc. Now, I think that's what I finally got what Spinoza meant when he said, truth is its own standard. What he meant was, all you can use to judge if you're moving towards reality is that sense presence of voluntary necessity that's at the core of reason, love, beauty, etc. And you can say that can all lead you astray. Yes. And what do you use in order to judge that it's led you astray? The voluntary necessity sense is at the heart of reason, love, beauty, flow, relevance realization. And then what Spinoza means more deeply is when that sensed calling, he called it the intellectual love of God, is calling us into a deeper relationship with a deeper reality. Now this is happening at multiple levels because you exist at multiple levels. You have your agency. Well, left that out too long. I hope the red comes up as much. You have your agency. This is the fact that unlike a fire, you seek out the conditions that produce and protect your existence. You're an agent, so is a paramecium. But you're not just an agent. You use narrative. Oh goodness, John Vervaeke's talking about narrative. You use narrative to become a temporally extended agent. You work in terms of goals that affect your far future in terms of things that come from your deep past. No matter how eloquently a dog barks, it can't tell you that its parents were poor but hardworking. But you can. Through narrative, you become extended in time. You become extended in reflection. You can reflect back on yourself by telling yourself your autobiography. You can consider possibilities by running the time clock forward on your autobiography. That's what it is to be a self. It is to use narrative to extend your agency in time, possibility, and levels of construal. But that's not all you are. You're also a person. You do something that no other thing can do, barring God or something like that. I mean, no other biological organism. You make promises. You make promises. You do things not because of your agency or your selfhood, because of your desires or your autobiography. You do things because you are obligating yourself to what is true or good or beautiful. And you always do. There are no persons without communities, and there are no communities without persons. You're doing religio at all of those levels, and it's always imaginal. And it's always multi-leveled. Which means there are levels to you that are primordial. They're sub-egoic. They're from which everything springs. For example, relevance realization religio is primordial in a profound sense. Before you can form representations, thoughts, ideas, formal, all of that presupposes relevance realization. And if you don't believe me, go and look. I've got a few things on relevance realization. Go look at all the published work, all the arguments. But it not only reaches into the primordial, like Elizabeth's roots of the tree, it also reaches above into the community and beyond into the super-egoic, like the branches of the tree. And it's not only porous this way, it's not only porous participation this way, it's porous participation this way. Because it's not like this is a ladder. It's not like your agency is left behind when you're a person. It bleeds into yourself and into your person, and your personhood bleeds down into yourself and down into your agency. That's why you have weird things like the placebo effect. Because you believe that person is the doctor with the requisite authority, and he's come in and he's acting out of a obligation, and he's telling stuff, and you can imagine it, and it reaches down into your agency, and then it reaches down below your agency, and you get healed. Now, somebody who's doing a lot of work on that is a biologist who is going to be thought about in 20 years from now the way we think about Einstein now, and this is Michael Levin, who I consider a friend. And Mike has been doing undeniable experimental work showing that cognition reaches down to the subegoic into subcellular mechanisms and reaches up beyond individual organisms. Take a look at his work. It is astonishing. You got bottom-up stuff. So we've been taught, Richard Dawkins, selfish gene. It's just all bottom-up from your genes because you're a machine, you know. What Mike shows is no, the community of the cells communicate bioelectrically, and that's a top-down constraint on what the cell actually becomes. And if you change the bioelectric field, the cell will become a different cell. Genetic determinism is dead. Doesn't mean that genes aren't playing a role, but like Jonathan said, it's bottom-up and top-down. Well, we're talking about levels. That's a way we have to talk, but that's not the way it is. Notice like more than any World War II, World War I army, modernism has these ditches that this is the last ditch. No, there's another one. There's another one. Well, yes, I concede that we have to talk that way, but that's not the way it really is. Really, read Eric Hole's 2 papers, 2020-2025, in which he uses tight, rigorous mathematical argument from core assumptions in information theory or core assumptions in the philosophy of science of causation to show that these levels are real, meaning that each level has causal powers not found at the other level, and each level has access to information inaccessible at the other levels. These levels are really, really real. So this is not just a way of talking. This is the way things are. And to turn it around, we have to talk this way, not because we're trapped in a Kantian nightmare. We have to talk this way because we're in a porous participation with reality, and reality is really that way, and that's why we have to talk that way. Why don't we consider that? So this is convergent. The fact that you are a porous participatory thing, this is convergent with all the evidence that your cognition is not monological, it's dialogical. You do better, reliably, experimentally, if you're in dialogue with other people rather than reasoning inside your own head. That should be uncontroversial. The best science shows that the model of reasoning given to us by the Enlightenment, computation in your head, is actually scientifically disconfirmed. You actually do your best reasoning, this is work I'm doing with Dan Schiappi, in dialogue with other people. Porous participation. But we were taught that what we had, no, we have to disengage. This is Charles Taylor. We have to disengage. And we have to view the reality objectively, which means view it absolutely still and unmoving, the view from nowhere. What's the view from nowhere? Well, it's the view of everything, everywhere, all at once. Gödel showed it's logically impossible to have a formal system that is both complete and consistent. It is logically impossible to have a view of everything, everywhere, all at once. I'll put God aside because God doesn't fit in the lab. View of everything, everywhere, all at once? That requires absolute space. Einstein showed that's not possible. Do you understand? The model of disengagement is based on a picture that was not argued for, but was presented as correct, that is actually logically and physically impossible. Here's an idea. Let's not believe in things that are logically and physically impossible. That seems to me like a really rational thing to do. Why and how did we adopt this disengagement? We reverse engineered it from a desire for control and certainty. Why did we need control and certainty? Because, and all three of these words have the same etymological origin. They're siblings from a common ancestor. Truth, trust, and troth, like being betrothed to somebody. We lost those. Why did we lose them? Well, there's a video series called Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. So the response to the meaning crisis was disengagement, and what we'll do is we'll create a buffered self. And what we'll do is we'll separate intimacy from inquiry. And here's the thing I want to push you on. If you think that what we should be doing is concentrating on our personal relationships, because that's where intimacy is to be found, and that's where it should and only be found, you are actually buying into the picture that I'm criticizing. If the scientist can't have an intimate relationship with the world as he's studying it by recognizing his porous participation in it, then you haven't heard anything I'm talking about. Because we think of intimacy as the special thing that happens to buffered selves, and what they have to do is they have to get all by themselves and put walls and curtains around them and block it all off. Okay, now I'll get naked with you. I'll be vulnerable here. But we're porous partakers. We are not disengaged observers. What I'm trying to get you to see is that spirit. There's porous participation from the sub-egoic. Let's use a different word, from the archetypal to, let's use a Platonic word, to the paradigmatic. Porous participation all the way up, all the way down, all the way in, all the way out. That's spirit. And that spirit can become a sensed presence to you. Not just an idea. It's a sensed presence that can call to you. It can call you deeper, higher or lower, deeper in or out. And when the primordial and the ultimate are resonating, and the inner and the outer are resonating, the vertical and the horizontal, I'm suggesting to you, that's spirit. So why is it incredible for you to think there might be a spirit of a city when you understand that there's a spirit of the billions of neurons in your brain, and you call it me? What's the difference? Well, I'm the buffered self, and selfhood ends here. Below, within, okay, I can deal with that. But above or below, no, just here. People actually literally think the self is sort of right here, about 3 inches in. You get a sensed presence of our porous participation. It's not just an unconscious thing. See, what Dan Chappie and I argued, the work we did with the scientists and the rovers, is it's paradoxical because one of the rovers was called Spirit, right? The scientists form a spirit, and that spirit can track hyper patterns that individual cognizers can't grasp. And now Eric Hole has showed that that's actually mathematically provable. But remember, the brain is modeling itself to model the world, and as it models the world, it's modeling itself. And what can happen is that sense of you being, that processing that's imaginal, dialogical, porous participation, it can go from being, I'm going to do this, the glasses you look through, to something you look at. And that's the work of Anderson Day and John Geiger and a whole bunch of other people in presence. And we now have to, this is going to be weird, and it needs to be weird, because weird is showing you that we're starting to break the dichotomies. The number of people that have sensed presence is way more than you realize. The number of people who hear voices and aren't psychotic or have mental health issues is large. And there's a continuum. Some people have a sensed presence and it's something just sitting beside my right shoulder. Other people have like a Socratic daemon talking to them. And you think that's weird and strange, but pay attention to what's called parts work in IFS. Talking to the different sub-egoic parts of you is now the norm and becoming the dominant norm in psychotherapy. It's weird. Now here's the thing that's encouraging. When you feel weird and creeped out, we know this because of psychedelic research and altered states of consciousness. Altered states are neither good nor bad. They're neutral. The best way to understand them is they're states of epistemic vulnerability. Epistemic vulnerability. The buffered self is broken, you're vulnerable. Now that can go really bad, and that can go really good. It's a double-edged sword. The evolutionary basis for this is you get weirded out, and you sometimes get sensed presence when you're weirded out, because what's happening is your brain is putting itself into an optimal state for the fastest, broadest learning it is capable of. And it's relying on the fact that you're inherently dialogical, transjective, and porous participation, and it's foregrounding your glasses because it's saying, you better update your glasses. And that can be a spirit talking to you. Now what if we have a joint sensed presence that is reaching down to the primordial, reaching up to the ultimate, reaching from the archetypal to the paradigmatic, reaching into the sub-egoic aspects of my inner life, reaching out to the hyper patterns of reality, resonating them in a way that is reasonable, that is orienting me in a reciprocal opening, individually and collective, to a greater reality. So we're sharing a spirit that is imaginal and transjective, and for that reason is reasonable and real. And we can share it, and we can live it together. And it can unite our depths to our heights, and our innermost selves to our outermost aspirations. William Desmond argues that, some of you have seen my discussions with James Filler, that James says, you can't get relations out of things, and you can't. But then I said to James, but you know what? You can't get things from relations either. And he went, oh yeah. And then William Desmond was ahead of both of us. He said, what we actually have is common unity, community. Remember what I said? There's no people without community, and there's no community without people. The relations and the relata co-emerge from something primordial together. In order for us, this is Yanaris, another great philosopher. In order, he called it the communal criterion, not the definition, the communal criterion of truth. In order for there to be truth, we have to have shared meaning. Meaning has to be shared. You know what's bullshit? This is my meaning. That doesn't make any sense. You don't do that with any other kind of meaning. I'm using the word cat to refer to a kind of flower found only in the depths of the Amazon. That's my meaning. That's not how meaning works. If you think meaning is a personal possession, you are falling prey to everything I'm criticizing. If it's not shareable, connectable, and correctable by others, don't tell me about your meaning. I'm not interested in it because you don't know what you're talking about. You have to have trothing. You have to have trusting before you can have truthing. And so he has the communal criterion for truth. Community is our best. It's not a representation. It's our best icon of how reality ultimately is. Communing in community is our best way of getting towards the truth. Voluntary necessity with each other, vertical and horizontal, porous participation. Fellowship of the Spirit is to participate in all of this in such a way that we become icons of God. Because communing in community is to enact the best model of ultimate reality and to engage the best way we get at connecting to reality and getting at the truth. That's my proposal to you about what fellowship in the Spirit is.